My name's Tim Knowles. This is Gravity Jiu Jitsu, and this is where we train Jiu Jitsu.
Where you train Jiu Jitsu? Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so how did you get started in training?
So I had done the Army combatives, when I was in the Army. I grew up, always had an interest in, combat sports, martial arts, things like that. Played football to kind of scratch that itch because we didn't have anything available, so
Yeah.
took Taekwondo and stuff as a kid. And then I was always physical, always enjoyed, that aspect. But then, I did that Army combatives course. I was big into lifting weights. I was strong, so I felt like, that was all enough. And then my son, when he was 10, saw some Taekwondo demonstration and wanted to do Taekwondo. And I was like, well, I think you want to do Jiu Jitsu, And so he's like, well, what's Jiu Jitsu, Dad? So I pulled up UFC 1, Hoist Gracie and chemo. And after that, he was like, yeah, I want to do Jiu Jitsu. So the next week we went and started, training. So.
Nice. Where did you start training at?
So we started at a gym in Virginia, trained there for a few years, got my blue belt there, and then COVID hit and everything kind of shut down. And
yeah. So how did you end up transferring from the school in Virginia to here? Like, what was that?
So when I got furloughed as a part of COVID, the story at work was they weren't going to hire anybody back. So, it was either stay there and wait it out or try to do something different. So as a family, we just decided that we'd move back to Texas, kind of regroup, figure it out. I didn't want to stop training. I didn't want my son to have to stop training. So there was some family friends here that had kids that were his age that, agreed to train. My brother-in-laws agreed to train with me. We bought some little puzzle piece mats, and so it was kind of like, hey, we'll just do a garage gym, order instructionals, whatever, but at least we can continue training. So at the time, that was the goal, just to continue training.
Makes sense. Okay. So how did it go from the puzzle piece mats, your brother-in-law, and your son, and some kids, to this?
So I had a high school friend that saw some pictures on Facebook, and he was like, he had a 5-year-old and he wanted his 5-year-old to start training. So he messaged me and was like, hey, you taking students, And I was like, I don't know, sure, yeah, why not, So then my buddy and his son came and they started training with us. And then after that, it was a few more, so the interest just started to grow. So then after that, it was like, well, maybe we can do this. So then it became, trying to find an affiliation. How do we do this legitimately? And so then, we started down that path.
Nice. Okay, so you have affiliation and stuff. Who are you affiliated with?
Yeah, so Christian Wood-Mancy, Andre Galval, Atos black belt. So he was who we were affiliated with in Virginia. When we first moved here, I kind of played with the idea of trying to train somewhere, but there just wasn't anywhere that was, close enough proximity to be able to do that long term, Also, I was furloughed, so I didn't know when I was going to get hired back. So then, trying to train somewhere was going to be difficult. And then the environment and the culture of the gym was important to us, So at some point we were like, it's probably better if we just try to start our own thing, create our own culture, create our own environment, and then we're in control of it, and you're not at the mercy of somebody else's environment, So when we decided, like, hey, we need to make this legitimate, I kind of started looking for an affiliation. I reached out to Christian really just to get some advice. Like, I didn't really know how that conversation was going to go, and then he just immediately was very supportive. Was willing to help with everything. In terms of getting mats, pricing, contracts, training, coming down here, teaching us, training us, doing all the whole bit. And so at that point, it was like, yeah, handshake deal, and we're off. So yeah, it's been great.
That's really cool that he was so supportive of you and helped you get everything started. Right. So you talked about culture and the environment. What are the key components of the culture and environment that you wanted to build?
Yeah, so we wanted it to be one, family friendly, right? We wanted it to be one where everybody feels welcome coming in here. I didn't want it to be like a kill house. I didn't want it to be intimidating, right? Because jiu-jitsu is intimidating as it is, and so it's hard to walk in the door. It's hard to step on the mat, and it's gonna be difficult, So I wanted it to be friendly, and I wanted, for me, one of the big things with the kids program was that we did jiu-jitsu, right?
Okay.
We had seen other programs where it was heavy into playing games and different things like that, and my son started losing interest as a result of that. So I didn't want it to be PE class. I didn't want it to be recess, so that was important. Not that we don't have fun, but the main thing had to be, we're doing jiu-jitsu. The goals of the students are individual, so if people want to compete, then we'll help them compete, and we'll go, do that. If they want to be a recreational athlete and just do jiu-jitsu to get in shape and have fun and meet friends or whatever, then we can do that. If it's a bullying situation and it's self-defense, then, for sure we'll try to, meet those goals as well. So, I don't want to force goals on anybody, just like I don't want to force a style of jiu-jitsu on anybody.
Okay.
I just want to support them in whatever goals they have set for themselves.
Okay, so if the goals are individualized and everything like that, and you were talking about it being hard to step on the mat and jiu-jitsu being intimidating, what's your advice for somebody who may be on the fence about training, somebody who's just kind of thinking about it but hasn't quite taken that first step yet?
I think you have to find the right environment, so I would say, one, commit to doing it, make that decision that you're gonna do it, and then, visit a few gyms and talk to the instructors, talk to the owner, find the gym that has the culture and the environment that you feel like is gonna meet your goals, or your training philosophies, what you're going after. So you probably have to give a little bit of thought of what you want out of jiu-jitsu, why you're doing it in the first place, so then you can find that right environment. But, if you're a recreational athlete and all you want is to get in better shape and learn a little jiu-jitsu and you walk into a competition-heavy gym, it's probably going to be hard for you. If you're competition-oriented and you walk into a purely recreational gym, then, that might be hard for you, So jiu-jitsu gyms, whatever, can also be very cliquish, So I think walking in the door, you kind of get an idea for how friendly they are, how open they are, and that kind of a thing. So if meeting new friends is important to you, then, that could be a good indicator that you're in the right spot or the wrong spot. So I think it's just visiting gyms, finding the right place, but, ultimately you just have to commit that you're going to do it and go.
Understandable. So if somebody has committed to go and everything, what is the process for them to come to their first class for your gym?
For here? So, part of the environment and the culture, I want to protect it, so I would say we're exclusive in terms of I'm not just going to let anybody train here that wants to train here. So generally, they reach out, we schedule an appointment, they come in, we do some sort of, consultation. I've got a questionnaire that they fill out, and it's really trying to figure out who are they, what do they want, what are their goals, why are you here, what have you tried in the past to meet those goals, that kind of a thing. And then based on that, we offer jiu-jitsu as a solution to whatever it is they're identifying as the problem. But it also allows us to be a little bit exclusive in terms of, if we don't think they're going to be a good fit for our environment, then we don't have to offer them a membership. But generally, we start them out on a 6-week trial. In that 6 weeks, we try to teach them the basics and the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. We try to limit the live rolling and try to stay with specific sparring, so they're only in positions that they kind of know a little bit about, Yeah. And I think it's a little bit safer that way, but then it's also easier for them to learn and remember positions as we start to try to make adjustments and corrections. And then after that 6 weeks, if we feel like they're a good fit for the gym and they want to continue training, then at that point we can offer them a membership. If we deem that, hey, they're not a good fit for the environment or there's issues or whatever, then, we can part ways and make sure we keep the environment what it's meant to be.
And at that point, they've already learned a little bit of stuff.
Correct.
And it sounds like a really good way for somebody that may be a little bit scared to get into the rolling and things like that,
Right.
to get a good
Ease them into it.
a good foundation before they go
Right.
into actually rolling and actually
Right.
doing everything. So since we're talking about newbies, what did you wish that you knew when you were first starting?
Yeah, I wish I had understood training goals, how to train, how to make goals for training better versus just going in, learning whatever we're learning that night, and then just kind of slap bump and whatever happens, right?
Yeah.
And then, I think in that mentality, the success is then whether you win or lose the round, right? Did I submit my opponent or not? So I wish I had understood having training goals, things that I was trying to accomplish, so then success is not necessarily attached to whether I won the round, but more so did I accomplish whatever goal I was training, and trying to meet. I wish I had understood the difference between like getting lucky and having success versus creating success that could be repeated. So if we were training and I'm just spazzy and flying around and somehow make it past your guard, but I don't know how I did that. I can't redo it because I didn't really, how did you do that? Well, I don't know. I just moved around and it happened, So I when I teach the kids, I kind of call that lottery jiu-jitsu, where it's not, you didn't really have success. You made it somewhere, but you can't do it again or you can't reproduce it, So that's kind of the lottery to me. You're not successful if you win the lottery. You just kind of got lucky and it happened and now you're in a good spot. So I wish I kind of understood that a little bit more. And I wish I'd been introduced to concept-based jiu-jitsu versus just learning various techniques and then trying to understand, why they work or how they chain together and things like that, but more the concepts of jiu-jitsu, the concepts of positions, the concepts of the submissions and things like that.
So if you're talking about concepts and movements and things, going back to your 6 weeks of somebody coming in and teaching them the basics, like, what concepts do you teach somebody in those first 6 weeks that you kind of cover, or is it you're going to learn these certain moves? Like,
Yeah, so the way we've done it in the past is it's a 6-week course, and that over that 6 weeks we're trying to focus on the fundamentals and the basics of Jiu Jitsu, so each week we're kind of spending on each position, so the first week, like, we spend on guard, what is guard, what is closed guard, what am I trying to do when I have closed guard, creating angles, breaking down posture, that kind of thing. Certainly we teach some techniques and some sweeps and submissions from the position, but it's really just trying to understand what is it and what am I trying to do here. Then the next week we go into, from the top perspective. I'm inside somebody's closed guard, right? So how do I open this? What do I not want to have happen to me? How do I maintain my base and maintain my posture? And then how do I open their closed guard and then get into passing? And then each week after that, we just, continue with side control. What is side control? How do I control it? How do I maintain it? What are some options there? And then how do I advance? So by the end of that 6-week program, we spend a little bit of time in each position, understanding what the position is, kind of the hierarchy of the dominant positions, which ones are the better ones, which ones, how to get to each one of them. So at the end of it, like, by no means are you an expert, but you kind of have an understanding of like where you want to go or where you don't want to be, and then have some options from there. So that's kind of the goal, is just to have a little bit of an understanding of each one of the positions, and then somewhere to build from.
Makes sense, yeah. In 6 weeks, if you were an expert at jiu-jitsu, like, a lot of people would be experts.
Yeah. And then what are we all doing, spending our life doing jiu-jitsu? Yeah.
So what are the most common misconceptions of jiu-jitsu?
So I think most people look at any martial art that's in a gi, and you just automatically assume that it's karate or it's taekwondo, and we're punching and kicking and things like that. And so jiu-jitsu is a submission grappling martial art. We're working on how we take people from the feet to the ground and how we control them on the ground and control dominant positions, transition between them, and then ultimately, submit with a joint lock or a choke. So I think people don't understand what it is, especially for like adult males. They think that it's not going to work, or they don't need it. Like, jiu-jitsu won't work on me. And I think the unique thing about jiu-jitsu and grappling martial arts is that it's 100% effective. I mean, if you cut blood supply off to the brain, you're going to pass out. If you bend a joint in a direction that it's not meant to be bent, it will break. So there's no guessing at it, and we test everything at the end of the night, with live sparring. So there's no wondering if it works because it's tested. I think that would probably be the biggest misconception for me.
You said you had a story.
Oh yeah. So in terms of jiu-jitsu not working or feeling like you can handle yourself, you don't need it. So I'd done the Army Combatives program. I was about 195 pounds. I was big into weightlifting, so I had that bodybuilder type appearance. I was strong. I was benching 420. I could do 5 sets of 10 with 315. I was strong. So I felt like between that, my athleticism, and the little bit of Army Combatives that I had, that I could handle myself. I wasn't delusional. I didn't think I could necessarily handle myself against a trained fighter. But when we went in for our first class, I was paired up with a kid, and he probably didn't even remember it, but he had a huge impact on me. He was 15, he was 125 pounds soaking wet, long-haired, skater punk looking kid. Like, in no world would I consider this kid a threat. And so he was the first person that I rolled with that night, live training. And he submitted me like 7 or 8 times in 5 minutes, right? And there was nothing I could do to stop it. It wasn't one of those things where it was like, oh, if we were out on the street, this would be different. Or if I could punch you, it would be different, or anything like that. It was like, no, it's happening, and it's repeated. And it felt like magic. You know what I mean? It really was like, I don't have a legitimate answer for anything that he's doing. And he's doing the same thing to me over and over and over again, and I can't stop it. And so to me, at that moment, I was like, I can't argue this. Like, it absolutely works. In everything that I've been doing and everything that I've been putting a lot of stock in terms of me being able to defend myself, like, it was all a farce. Like, it didn't matter. So at that point, I was like, no, I've got to learn this.
So speaking of that, one of the biggest things that constantly comes up in jiu-jitsu is ego. So what are your thoughts about ego in jiu-jitsu?
Oh man, everybody has one. It's how do you manage it? And for me, it was really hard because there's something like very intimate and like primal about jiu-jitsu. So I couldn't detach myself from the fact that, like, the only reason my arm's not broken tonight, or the only reason I'm not dead tonight, is because you honored my tap. You know what I mean? So I'd go home and I would lay awake, like I'd wake up in sweats, thinking about what had happened to me that night, like it was traumatic, and at some point, like, I had to detach myself from the result, you know, and look at it more as like a game, and I'm learning, and it's a humbling sport, you know, because all the things that you think you can do, all of a sudden you learn you can't, and so you just have to check the ego. Like, you have to look at it as a game, and this is a training environment, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to do things, and I'm going to fail, and when I fail, I'm going to try to learn from those mistakes and figure out why I failed, or what this person's doing that's causing me to fail, and then try to do better next time.
So we talked about failure and ego and all that. How has training jiu-jitsu kind of affected your overall life? Has it had any effect on your mentality or things like that?
Yeah, I think jiu-jitsu has a way of exposing, I don't know, you can call them flaws in your character maybe, or you know, internal things. Like, for me, one of the things I learned about myself was that I cared way too much what other people think, and I have to deal with that. It's not something that I've dealt with, but I'm aware of it. So now I can deal with it better, and I can address it when I start to see it come up in myself. I'm not so sure that I would have been made aware of it the same if I had not have been doing jiu-jitsu. You know, I don't know what would have exposed that in me.
How has jiu-jitsu changed the way you live your life, your mentality?
It showed me that I was comparing myself to others too much, right? You start to worry about, like, what other people are doing, or the success that somebody else is having, and not then focusing on yourself, you know? And so in jiu-jitsu, you know, it can be somebody else is making improvements, I'm not. Somebody else is getting promoted, I'm not. Somebody else is having success competing, I'm not, whatever. And so you can sit there and stew on that, you know, and it has a pretty big effect on your life, I think. But the, you know, the focus needs to be on yourself, you know, and how you're improving and what you're doing to get better. And so it helped me see that I was doing that too much, you know, too worried what other people think, too busy comparing myself to other people, and none of that really mattered.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that being a big
Yeah,
thing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and then it applies to life, you know. It's not just jiu-jitsu, you know. Then it has a big part outside of the gym as well. So
makes sense. All right, Tim, it's been a pleasure training with you. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
for coming. Yeah.
And why don't you tell the people how they can find your school and get a hold of you?
Yeah, we're here out in East Texas, Alba, Texas. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, Gravity Jiu-Jitsu. Our website's gravityjj.com. So look us up, Google us. We're here.
Thank you, Tim.